A very good evening to you. Welcome to Correro. Politics is as much about institutions as it is about elections. Structures determine outcomes and laws shape the boundaries of competition. I am Godwin Sunday and this is Correro, where Nigerians' unfolding political playbook meets national reflection. As the country edges towards the 2027 election, one document remains and returns to the center of a daily conversation, and that is the Electoral Act. The Act has become a referee of sorts, defining campaign finance rules and party primaries, dispute resolutions, and the role of technology in accreditation and transmission of results. While many observers and credit it for improving clarity in the electoral process, critics argue that loopholes still allow internal party manipulations across competing even without consequences and post-election litigations that drag for months. Beyond legislation, party structures remain the engine room for even Nigerian's politics. Strong grassroots organization, nationwide presence, internal discipline, and financial capacity often determine who even makes it to the ballot. For old parties, the question is resilience. For emerging parties, the question is viability. And for voters, the question is whether structures still overpower the idea. So as 2027 draws nearer, analysts are watching not just the candidates who may emerge, but the system that produces even all of these candidates. Will the Electoral Act encourage more transparency? Will party structures democratize participation or gatekeep ambition? And what role will institutions, the media, and citizens play in shaping the next cycle? To help us break it down, we are joined in the studio by a person of Barrister Akintayo Balogun, who is a legal practitioner. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, we'll dive into the conversation. Please stay with us. You're welcome back. We're right now being joined by Barrister Akintayo Balogun, who will help us make sense even with the Electoral Act and the various party structures. It's a delight to have you on Correro tonight, Barrister Balogun Akintayo. All right, so Barrister Balogun, looking at the Electoral Act, of course, each and every electoral cycle tends to amend the act to reflect what Nigerians should expect. But we're seeing the back and forth in this Electoral Act. Looking at all of the acts right now, are we ready for the 2026 elections and 2027 elections by extension?
Well, if you would ask me.
Yeah, Barrister Balogun, if you can hear me, we'll try to find out from you. All right, please go ahead.
Okay, now, I was saying that as far as I'm concerned, we are still not ready. Why would I say that? The Electoral Act that was amended in 2022 was what was used for the election. And when we got to court, we had so many issues, whereby results that came in through the IREV, were practically abandoned. And we still went to court, and the court, still did not see reasons why results that were uploaded on the portal should be relied upon. Until we get to that point where, one of the problems, sometime last year, I wrote an article, or 2 years ago, I wrote an article, and I said, the problem of Nigerian election is this place that is called the Collation Center. Collation Center is practically one of our biggest problems, because what happens on the field is usually not the same with what happens in the Collation Center. It is at collation centers that we have a lot of manipulation. And that is why the 2022 Electoral Act introduced a system where results are uploaded right there at the election venue and sent via the IREV, so that even before results get to the collation center, you already have them being displayed on the screen. that would have formed such that the collation center would even become a secondary center for collation of results. Results are simply collated from what is being uploaded. This should be the primary collation center. And that is what we thought that the Electoral Act in 2022 had come in to correct and to rely upon. But unfortunately, it was not even looked at. It was the usual method of collation of results, the one that is known, the one whereby electoral officers will fly in from all the 36 states of the Federation into Abuja and then come and present their results. And there is the manual addition and calculation and all that. How long are we going to continue like that? If results simply from what is being collated online through the IREV is what stands as our primary source of collation, if that is the position, then we'll know that we're ready for 2027. Now, by the time this thing went to court, what happened? The court simply agreed with the results that was collated manually, not what was uploaded on IREV. And as it is now, that is the position. That is the position of the law. Until we come to the point where we say, okay, what was collated at the center and uploaded is our primary source, where no manipulation had happened, no tampering of results, no ballot stuffing, nothing. We are simply relying on what had been uploaded at the center. And the court says that is the position. If we have a law, an act that says that collation through IREV is the primary source of collating results, if we have an amendment that comes in this 2026 or early 2027 and says this is the position, then I can assure you that, yes, we are ready. But if we are still going by the position in the 2022 Act and by the decision of the courts that allows this manual collation of results, then I can boldly say that we are not ready.
Barrister Balogun, looking at the Electoral Act, even based on the readings that we've seen so far in the National Assembly, a lot of persons will say that politicians are deliberately trying to frustrate all of these legal documents in order for them to find loopholes to be able to manipulate the 2027 election. Do you agree with this submission from a legal standpoint?
Yes, to an extent, I agree. I agree, in fact, to a large extent, because unfortunately, we have leaders whose interest is more, they are more interested in their personal ambition. You know, that is where their target lies, in their personal ambition more than the interest of the country. So you are seeing red and you decide to call it blue. You are seeing white and you decided to call it brown. Why not amend these rules, amend this act in such a way that in the next 50 years, we won't have any need for amending these rules again? We can just rely on what we have. You see, we've had too many amendments and too often. Too many amendments and too often. Okay, now, we just made an amendment in 2022, and then for the next election season, we are thinking of another amendment. So, I don't know. We seem not to, and that's even if the present amendment is passed into law, the next election year now, we may find ourselves trying to amend the Electoral Act again. So I agree. It's just about personal ambition. It's about something that I will do that will not frustrate my ambition. That's just what most of this amendment is about, and not about the interest of Nigeria.
So interesting. But in a situation where a lot of Nigerians are not even speaking up to challenge the delay of the Electoral Act and the amendments of the Electoral Act, we've not seen Nigerians even try to carry placard to demonstrate on the street. Can we say that Nigerians are really dissatisfied with the 2022 Act, and as such, there is need and urgency for the replacement of that Act of enactment?
Let me start with the issue of carrying placards that you mentioned. You know, at least myself, we have been in Abuja for the past over a year now, and we see what happens when you carry placards in Nigeria. It has become a dangerous adventure for you to carry placards and say you are protesting or you are doing anything anti-government. So everyone is trying to protect his head. Everyone is trying to be careful so that I don't get on the wrong side of government. So the issue of protest now, let's just keep that aside. Now, but we're supposed to have something they call public hearing when there's going to be an amendment of this nature. When the bill goes through the first and I think second reading, then there's supposed to be a public hearing. Unfortunately, this is where it appears Nigerians have lost interest. I was listening to a professor sometime last week, and he was talking, and he said they called for public hearing on a particular bill that was to be passed. He said he went, it was just an announcement made, and he just followed the announcement and went to the National Assembly. He said he stood 3 hours at the gate before he could enter. In fact, he just couldn't enter. He had to call somebody from another state who called someone from inside the National Assembly before he now got a pass into the assembly. Now, if there is a call for public opinion, public hearing, and I have to stand by the gate for 3 hours, or I need to know somebody inside before I can access to be able to make my comments, is that not frustrating enough? Will I not just, well, if this is what they want to do, let them go ahead? So you call for public interest, public hearing, where people, the public, should be able to walk into the National Assembly and say, oh, there is public hearing on a bill that is about to be passed into law. And I want to make comments, I want to give opinions. And the person gets to the gates of the National Assembly and they say, no, you cannot enter. And he's there for 3-4 hours. That alone will frustrate the person. So if I know that I'm not going to gain free access into the National Assembly, I would stay in my house. Carrying placards is out of it, because before you know what, Nigeria, tear gas will begin to go around. Before you know what, police would arrest you. Before you know what, you are charged to court for disturbing public peace. People who went out recently on a peaceful protest, they were not carrying weapons, they were not carrying anything. Before you know, by 2 days after, they were charged to court. So the issue of carrying placards, let's leave that aside. With all due respect to the government of the Federation, they don't want people protesting. They don't want people carrying placards. They don't want people making statements that will go to the media saying the action of government is being refused or is being protested against or something. So this that I've mentioned now are the hindrances. That is why many people will sit back and say, let them do their things. Since if I talk, my talk will not be heard. If I protest, I will be arrested. To be on the safe side, let's sit down and watch.
All right. So, Barrister, a lot of persons will also say that to a very large extent, the 2022 Electoral Act has worked. A practical demonstration is what has played out in Anambra State. Now, looking at it critically from that point of view, the beavers worked, which is captured in the Electoral Act. Is there need for a new Electoral Act in general?
Okay, like I earlier said, the part that Nigeria must deal with is this issue of uploading results from the polling unit. And the result that is being uploaded will serve as the primary collation. Now, if in fact, for me, if that is the only amendment that is done to the present Electoral Act, I think we are good to go.
So it's not that the Electoral Act is bad in itself.
Yes, it's not that it's bad, but we must be able to have an Electoral Act that guides and guards our elections, such that anybody, anywhere, can just say, okay, yes, indeed, these results are in order. See, it is in this part of the country or in this part of the world that you see results are being contested and it drags all the way to the Supreme Court. Since I started following politics, at least the last 20 to 25 years, You would never hear or hardly ever hear where the American results, presidential elections, are being challenged, and then we drag and they drag and they drag and they drag all the way to the Supreme Court. The first that I heard where results were being challenged to an extent was the results, I think the one between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Yes, during this first tenure. I think that's one result that I know that, okay, they were counting and recounting of results and all that. But then their results are such that before you know what, the other person congratulates the other person and say, congratulations, I concede defeat. It's difficult to concede defeat in Nigeria because what happens at the polling unit is different from what happens at the collation center. Completely different. So what we are really craving for and desiring in this new amendment that will be done is that whatever happens at the polling unit, the result that is being uploaded to the portal, that result should serve and stand as the primary collation center. That is the result that should be looked at, and then you add it to every other and then take it to the general collation center. Let the one that comes in manually, let it be the secondary, let it be a backup and not the primary. If that alone is done and we use that, I can assure you that Nigerians will have a level of confidence in the next election.
Right. Barrister, a lot of persons have alleged, again, that it is due to the lacunas in the Electoral Act. That's why we have a lot of political rancors, a lot of structural inadequacies within the political space. How correct is this assertion that it is due to the lacunas in the Electoral Act? That's why we have faulty structures within the political space.
Yes, that's exactly the same thing that I just said now. You know, if we have a mandatory statement now in our Electoral Act that says results that are uploaded, a mandatory statement, when I say mandatory, shall, that makes it mandatory. And it says that the result that is uploaded on IREV is the primary. See, if we just have that statement alone, I think to a very large extent, our problems have been solved. Some few years ago, I was an advocate of electronic voting in Nigeria. I feel and I still believe and strongly believe that we have gotten to that point where we can embark on electronic voting in Nigeria, such that you don't even need an Android phone or to be able to vote. Just the way you dial a code to check how much balance you have on your credit, or to check if you can buy data or something. A code, a USSD code, as simple as that, would be used for voting in Nigeria. That is my own opinion. But it appears that many people are still of the opinion that we have not gotten to that level. Our legislators also believe we have not gotten to that level. If we are still believing, okay, let's still continue with the go to a polling unit, join the queue, do all that, and vote. Let it be that the result is uploaded there at the center.
All right, but
sorry, let me just conclude.
Please.
If that alone, for me, that is the lacuna in the Electoral Act. And I can tell you that the last amendment and this amendment is deliberately running away from just that gap. Close that gap, and we won't have problem of collation centers again.
Well, Barrister, a lot of people a lot of politicians have decided to hide under the Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution as against the Electoral Act. The Chapter 4 gives them the right to even association, and as such, they can move from Party A to Party B. Can we forth this old movement to the Electoral Act or to the lacuna enshrined in the Constitution?
Okay, when you said people move from party to party,
Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution, which gives the fundamental human rights, it also gives room for freedom of association. By extension, isn't this the contradictory end which the Electoral Act has also adopted, and hereby causing a lot of defection and cross-carpeting without formal regulations?
Okay, now let me ask, so that I'm very sure of your question now. the cross carpeting, the changing of political party you are talking about, is it of elected
Elected
persons?
representatives, yes.
Elected represent. Well, now you see the issue of elected representatives jumping from one political party to another. For me, it is not an issue of the Electoral Act. The issue lies in the Constitution. Because even if the Electoral Act is amended and it says something now, and whatever it says contradicts what's in the Constitution, then that provision of the Electoral Act stands void. It stands void. So for me, if the Electoral Act is amended in line with the issue of you cannot cross carpet, you can cross carpet and all that, if the Constitution is not amended, whatever amendments you make to the Electoral Act stands void. So it goes back to the Constitution. It goes back to the Constitution. And what does the Constitution say? The Constitution is very, very explicit about jumping from one political party to another. Yes, those who did, the drafters of the Constitution, they looked at it and said, a person cannot remain perpetually in a political party. Even if you have been voted into office, you cannot be perpetually tied down to that office. And the Constitution now gave room. Mind you, the room is given only to legislators. The governor, the president, and the deputy, they are not included in this issue. So it's just legislators, National Assembly and State Assembly members. Now, if you are to move from one party to another, the Constitution gives grounds on which you can jump from one party to another. Your life is not tied to a party because you were elected on that party. No, there are certain conditions, there are certain issues. If these issues are being met or these conditions are found in the party, then you can move. And you know, one of the strongest grounds for which a person can change political party while serving is where there is serious division, both at the national and at the state level. So now, if a party is divided, if a party is heavily divided, there are issues in the party at the national level. You won't insist that somebody who has been elected should remain there because he will look and say, I don't have hope. My political future is at stake. And you know, without talking in parables, looking at the current political trend in Nigeria, let me mention political parties so that we don't sound as if we are talking off point or we are talking in parables or my talk is being abstract. Several politicians moved, or several elected members, including governors, moved from the PDP to APC. Many also moved from the Labour Party to the APC. Now, what justification do they have for this movement? They are justified in the sense that these two political parties were having and still having leadership tussle at the national level. And that too is a constitutional provision. Once that problem...
You've said it was... Please go ahead. Let me know.
Yes. Once that problem is there at the national level, then anybody who is moving from that party to another is justified.
Including governors and presidents.
Now, for governors and presidents, like I said earlier, the Constitution is silent about them. They can move from any party to another. It doesn't say these are the grounds for which the governors must move or must stay. The Constitution was specific. It specifically said legislators. So governors and presidents they have unhindered right to jump from one party to another without any consequences. And we can see the ones that even went to court. When Governor Matawale of Zamfara, when he moved, the matter went to court. When Governor Umahi moved, former governor of Ebonyi State, when he moved, the matter went to court. And the Federal High Court, then of Justice Taiwo retired, he said no. And he agreed that the Constitution did not specifically mention governor. And on that ground, he refused the matter. But for the the State House of Assembly members that decamped, he's declared their seat vacant because at that point there was no problem in the PDP that warranted their decamping. So for me, it is not the Electoral Act that affects anybody. If the Electoral Act even makes provision now that no, you cannot decamp and all that, the Constitution too must be amended. In fact, the Constitution must be amended first, and then the amendment will now be reflected in the Electoral Act. So it is not a function of the Electoral Act now. This issue of the camping is a function of the Constitution.
So when a section of the Constitution, if I'm correct, that should be fall around section 40, 41, or 42, which gives rights to association. If that
Yes.
section of the Constitution is currently causing more of a near comatose situation among political parties, and the Electoral Act is not to be blamed. Recall that structurally, the cell, the branch, and also the caucus, which are supposed to be the political structure of various political parties, right now, it's even not where it should be. Rather, we have the militia, which is the fourth realm of that structure, being more prolific and more pronounced other than other structures of political parties that are supposed to speak out. Now, it's not captured in the Electoral Act, and the Constitution has further widened the gap, an excuse for politicians to decamp and further disrupt the structures. When we look at all of this put together, is there hope for political structures in Nigeria?
Well, we have a situation in Nigeria now where political structures, are determined by one or two persons. We can see what is happening in the PDP. It's like one man is speaking. In fact, it's like a one-man gang, determining issues in the party. I think earlier today, the issue of the party was at the Federal High Court, and this issue of the proper party, proper persons to represent the party, proper executive members of the party, that issue, as I speak, is dragging at the Federal High Court now. And with that, you won't expect somebody who has a political ambition to say, I'm going to sit tight with a party in this situation. Governor Adeleke of Osun State, he looked at it and he said, see, if I'm part of these primaries, the primary election they did some weeks ago, an election that is not being monitored by INEC, that is not being monitored by the national body because we don't even know who the national body is. If I remain within that fold, tomorrow a court may declare that my candidacy is void, is unknown. That is the same thing. If you look, you will discover that every governor that has a second-term ambition, they all left the PDP. The only two governors that are still there now are those who don't have a second-term ambition. So it is about, it's more like what I have to gain, what I have to lose, or what I have to gain. That is what determines where I am. The Labour Party, for example, now, there are debates. Abure is still holding to the office. There is also a caretaker committee that is also holding to the office. And everybody is dragging. Today, INEC is to recognize one, INEC is not to recognize the other. And there is that battle. Anyone who sees a party that is stable and does not have issues would want to cross there because they know that their political ambitions are guaranteed in these other places. So for me, it's like what we are looking out for is a party where there's a level of stability. The ADC now, there's a level of stability there. And that is why they are beginning to gain both active and non-active members, both elected and non-elected members. From nowhere now, they have a senator. I don't know whether they have reps members. I don't know. Okay, they don't have any governor, but at least I know they have a senator. Everybody is looking for where there is stability to be able to pursue their political ambitions.
All right. Barrister Akintayo, let's talk about the interpretation of various sections of the Electoral Act. Now, first, you agree with me that in 2023, certain Federal High Court, we don't want to mention name, and judges relied on manual compilation of results as against the electronic voting. Now, looking at all of this put together, would Nigerians be right to say that the judiciary are largely part of the problem why the Electoral Act cannot be fully implemented?
Well, to be very honest, you see this the position of the judiciary, which has to do with interpretation of the law, is a bit complex and has really I don't know whether I'll say has done us a lot of harm than good, because the interpretation of the laws is in the hands of the judiciary. You know, the drama that happened, for example, last year in Rivers State, where we had hoped that by the time the Supreme Court give its verdict, the Supreme Court will be able to say assertively what the Constitution has said. Particularly, for example, now I'm just giving an example now on this issue of defection. When you move from one party to another, you know, we had expected that when this matter gets to the Supreme Court on the issue of defection, we say it specifically that this is what the Constitution says. There is no problem in your party and you are decamping, then, but you know, as we have it, with utmost respect to the Supreme Court, by the time their judgment came out, you know, they added more conditions, grounds on which before a person can be before his seat can be declared vacant. You know, the Supreme Court said you must produce register of where he's coming from, register of where he's going to. That register is practically impossible. It is an impossibility. You cannot go to your enemy and ask your enemy to give you the weapon that is in his hand. That is practically what the Supreme Court said. That I should go and meet my enemy. He should give me the knife that is in his hand. Give me the shield in your hand, because I want to kill you with it. That is actually practically what the Supreme Court said. So for me, that was a position, and with almost utmost respect, that was an unfortunate position that was held by the Supreme Court. Now, this same issue on the issue of collation of results, reliance on the IREV, reliance on results uploaded on the portal. You know,
and
this manual compilation, this is something that the Supreme Court too would have also given a position on it. Not just the Supreme Court, the tribunal that sat on it would have also given a position and say, Electoral Act provides or makes provision for the uploading of results to the portal, which in my opinion should be the primary source for which results are being collated. If that is done, or if the position, if the courts, both the tribunal, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court had taken that position, then what they would have done is to look at the result that have been uploaded and say, by virtue of this result, who won or who lost, who should be elected or who should not be elected. If the Supreme Court or any of the courts had given this position, this is how it should be done, I'm sure we would not be where we are today. I'm sure people would be careful before tampering with any results.
All right.
But unfortunately, we still sit down, calculate, do the mathematics, how results should be calculated and all that. So unfortunately, we are still where we used to be over 50 years ago.
All right, Barrister Balogun, let me hold your thoughts there. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, we will talk more even on the Electoral Act and political structures. Please go nowhere. And you're welcome back. Well, you agree with me that the Electoral Act has become a referee of sorts, defining campaign finance roles, party primaries, dispute resolutions, and the role of technology in accreditation and transmission of results. Well, across board, not just even in a particular state or geopolitical zone, a lot of persons have, especially observers, have credited it for improving clarity in the electoral process. Well, critics have also argued that loopholes still allow internal party manipulation, cross-carpeting about consequences, without consequences, I beg your pardon, and post-election litigations that drag for months. Well, we are asking tonight that beyond the legislature, party structure remain engine room of Nigerian party politics. Now, when we say the party structure, we're trying to talk about the caucus through to the cell, to the branch, and to the militia, which forms the generality of a party structure. Now, strong grassroots organizations, nationwide presence, internal discipline, and financial capacity often determine who even makes it to the ballot. Well, but you agree that within the political space of Nigeria, there have been a lot of categories of people, of political parties. We have the old political parties, we have the emerging political parties, and we also have, call them the not too popular political parties. Well, when we look at all of this put together, trying to even tie this up to the Electoral Act, we begin to ask salient question: how effective, how efficient has the Electoral Act been in addressing certain concerns in Nigeria? Have the Electoral Act been able to live up to its responsibility in ensuring that it creates a level playing ground for all Nigerians to get involved in the political space, and also answer the question of a political dependency and political discrimination? Has the Electoral Act been able to answer questions that borders on the lacunas of the beavers, the IREV, and what have you within the Electoral Act? Questions remain also within the system that even produces them. Will the Electoral Act encourage more transparency? Will party structure be democratized, and also will participation, or will it serve as a gatekeep for the Nigerian populace? Well, these are many more issues that we've been trying to even look at, and I'm being joined by the person of Barrister Balogun Akintayo, who has been helping us put these issues in perspective on what role will institutions, the media, and civil society play in the next cycle elections, because we need to start answering all of this, looking at the off-cycle elections that are just by the corner. They have few states that will be going to the ballot, including the Federal Capital Territory come February. Will be also bringing in new area council chairmen. As the Electoral Act as amended 2022 been able to address all of this concern, or we should look beyond the Electoral Act and rather bank on the federal government coming out with a tentative document that can help enhance our electoral system? Well, these and many more are the questions that are begging for answers. But I've been signaled right now that it's time for us to go. I sincerely apologize for our inability to bring back Dr. Akintayo Balogun to join us in that conversation. But I want to say thank you so much for staying with us till this time. Don't forget that you can follow us across all our social media handle currently showing on your screen, and you can also download the Rapid TV app from your Android and iOS devices to keep track of our broadcast. My name is Godwin Sunday. Always remember that peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Do enjoy the rest of your night rest. Bye for now.